Welcome everyone to today's Title Topics webinar. This is ALTA's free 30-minute presentation that we've been offering each month to share important industry information with our members. I'm Jeremy Yowie, ALTA's Director of Communications, and today we'll be shifting from a heavy focus of best practices that we've been discussing the past several months to discuss recruiting and why it's important for the industry to start thinking about ways of filling the pipeline for the next generation of employees as the baby boomers draw closer to retirement. Before starting, I just need to hit on a few housekeeping items. A copy of today's presentation was emailed earlier today to all registrants. If you didn't get it, or if you may have registered in the last hour, please email me at jyohe@alta.org. That's jyohe@alta.org, and I will get you a copy of the presentation. All participants' lines are muted for today's call. If at any time you have a question, please use the chat function, and we will address questions at the end of the webinar. And as an added benefit, today's presentation is being recorded. After it's processed, the recording will be available on ALTA's website at alta.org/title topics. And I need to thank SoftPro for sponsoring our Title Topics webinars for 2013. This support allows us to continue providing these educational opportunities free of charge. And with that out of the way, let me introduce today's expert speaker. Joining us, we have Cynthia McGovern. She is the founder of Orange Leaf Consulting. Cynthia has a master's degree in marketing communications and a doctorate degree in organizational communication with an emphasis in organizational leadership and ethics. Cynthia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. I'm really honored to be a part of this webinar and to start this dialogue in our industry.
Yeah, and just before you launch the presentation, we wanted to make it the webinar a little bit more interactive, and we wanted to sprinkle in a few poll questions. So let me ask the group here the first question here, and it's kind of a general question about the age of your staff. So if you don't mind, make sure I ask. Nope, not the age of the staff, yes, yet. Are you concerned with the aging of the industry's workforce? So if you don't mind, go ahead and plug in some of the results, and we'll share results here after a few seconds here. Looks like about almost 70% of the people have voted. All right, we'll go ahead and close it here. Looks like about 85% of the people on the call, Cynthia, are concerned about the aging of the industry's workforce.
Well, I am too. So that's part of the reason I wanted to start some dialogue here. So should I go ahead and get started, Jeremy? What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this webinar, and I want to thank the ALTA once again for asking us to be a part of it. I am Cynthia McGovern, better known as the First Lady of Sales, and I help title companies grow their business. That's what we do. And part of the way we do that is we help you recruit the right staff, mostly in the arena of sales. And one of the things that we've seen in the last few years is, of course, a lot of our wonderful, seasoned team members in the title industry are starting to retire. And so we need to start having a dialogue around what do we do to create a succession plan and that sort of thing. But it also begs to start a larger dialogue around how do we recruit in our industry and what's changed. So throughout today, you're going to see on the side of your screen an area where you can post questions. Jeremy is going to help me monitor that. And if you do have questions, we encourage you to please submit them, and we will have some time at the end of our webinar today to answer questions. And of course, you are always welcome to reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to share thoughts and answers as well. So recruiting to win, rethinking the way that we grow. Everything in our industry has changed. If you really think about the last even 10 years of our industry, everything has changed. We don't even have carbon paper anymore. Remember those days? But we're still recruiting the way we always have. And part of it is simply because we kind of have this approach that it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is a little bit broken. And the reason I'll share that with you is because there's some talent pools out there we're not able to jump into just yet because our practices in the industry don't lend ourselves to that. So we are still recruiting the way we always did. We continue to throw money at key employees as a retention strategy. If they threaten to go to the competition, we give them a raise and we hope they stay. But are we still going to be doing the same things that we're doing today 20 years from now? And my take on this, I guess, to start the dialogue with you guys is I don't pretend to have the answers. Orange Leaf Consulting doesn't have the answers. What we do want to do is start thinking about the way that we're recruiting and start thinking about ways that we could differ and things that we can learn from other industries who do a great job of recruiting. So food for thought today, thinking about how everything has changed and why we should maybe change. So our workforce is aging, and just as the first poll in today's webinar said, 85% of you on the call today are concerned with our aging workforce. If you sit around any title company in the nation and you look at the average age of the employee, they are seasoned, which is wonderful, and it lends itself to great customer service and things of that nature. But the challenge is, what are we going to do when those folks retire? And the other problem is we exist in secret to way too many people. I mean, the joke in our industry is try to explain to somebody what we do. You know, I'm on airplanes all the time, and I sit down, and people say, oh, well, what kind of consulting do you do? And I say, I'm in the title business. And then I get the blank stare, and then they follow up with, oh, like when you buy a car? So that's not the case. We need to let people know this is a great industry with great people, and we do a great service for the economy, but we need to start telling that story. The other reason I think we need to really have this dialogue and create a case for change is that there's some pretty attractive industries out there that are stealing the hot new talent. Tech, you know, high-tech things. I mean, Google, we're based in San Francisco. Google buses their employees down to a campus, feeds them lunch, has massage parlors, on-site doctors, personal trainers. I mean, how do we compete with that? So we've got to start looking at how other industries are attracting talent and what things can we learn from those industries and apply to ours. And then this very special talent pool known as the millennials. By next year, millennials are actually going to be making up 36% of the workforce, and they're going to be 46% of the workforce by 2020. These are your tech-savvy, marketing-savvy, very new approach, new world type of talent pool. And we've got to find a way to invite them over to our industry. So, Jeremy, you had mentioned some of those polling. Let's go ahead and do another poll now of what the average age is of the staff in your own title operations. So you want to take that on, Jeremy, and let me know when we've got an answer on that one?
Yeah, sure. There you go. The poll question was just launched there, and go ahead and put in your response.
Fantastic. So while you guys are taking the poll, I'll go ahead and start talking a little bit about recruiting trifecta is what I call it. We've got to do a couple of different things. We've got to continue to hire top talent. That means inside and outside the industry. We've got to coach and mentor our current staff to continue to elevate their performance and create a stickier relationship with them so that they want to stay here and they're not enticed away by the grass is always greener approach. And then we need to look for blind spots in our own talent pool and really assess our current talent to see where we do have opportunity for growth. So let's start with the first piece of hiring top talent. There's always going to be a place for taking talent from your competitors, and we know how to do that in the industry. But here's some food for thought on that. When we recruit with money, we end up losing money. When we buy folks from the competition, we've simply said there is a cost associated with this, and we may have to buy them to stay later on. What I would encourage us to do is start a dialogue around how we recruit folks based on what they want, where they want to be, what their work home wants to look like. Money's always going to come into the picture, and it's always going to be part of the dialogue. But instead of doing the old school way of just offering a higher salary, let's get into a dialogue about what they're really going to get, and that creates part of that stickier relationship that we talked about. The other piece of this is focused and systematic development of the existing and up-and-coming employees, and what that basically means is coaching. We need to look at how we are treating our current staff, and some folks say, well, that's not really recruiting. It absolutely is. We're continuing to recruit them to stay with us. It's really a retention tactic. Build from within for lasting and loyal employees. And there's one more layer to that. Think about the folks in your office today. And you look around, you've probably got someone that started as a receptionist, somebody that started as a courier. They may be a branch manager today, 15, 20 years later. We have a very talented pool that we can draw from within our own organizations, but we need to look at it as recruiting. It's a recruiting effort, looking at where they want to be, and then train them, coach them, mentor them to step into that role. So there's internal recruiting as well. And then the third piece is examine where your organization can bring talent from other industries. And I'm not saying that we cannot be self-sufficient as an industry. I think we've done a really good job. But I do think that there's something to be said about fresh eyes and approaches that can provide that organizational analysis and an outside the fishbowl point of view for our industry. And so sometimes we're a little bit hesitant to hire folks outside of the industry because they don't know title. But what I would invite you to think about is none of us knew title either, and we learned the industry. I mean, none of us went to our parents at age 10 and said, I want to be in the title business when I grow up. So we've gotten into this industry, and we've stayed here because it's amazing. The people are amazing. We love the challenge. We love helping our agents and lenders. But we've got to let other folks know that it's a really cool place to be and it's a really cool place to work. Jeremy, let's talk about what happened in that poll. What did we find out about the average age of the staff? Are you there?
Yep, sorry, had muted my line.
I'm not sure if we got Jeremy or not. Oh, there he is. I'm like, we lost him.
Microphone foul. I muted my line. Obviously, I don't think there was too many surprises. 52% said the average age of their staff was 40 to 49. 21% said greater than 50. So, you've got 3/4 of the participants saying the age of their staff are 40 or older. Yep.
So the good news is, guys, we don't have everybody retiring tomorrow. The bad news is we do need to start thinking about it, and we do need to start thinking about the succession planning and looking at the numbers of the workforce pool that's out there, like those millennials. So thanks for doing that poll, Jeremy. I appreciate that, and it's really interesting to think about. Now let's pause for a second and talk about the difference between recruiting and hiring. I think a lot of what we do in this industry is hire. We hire from the competition. We hire from the person down the road that we know who's been great customer service at the other insurance company or something of that nature. And we tend to hire revenue-attached employees. We don't necessarily think of it as a recruiting strategy sometimes. And what I would say is we probably need to think of all of our hires as recruiting. Again, I mentioned, think about the person that started as your receptionist and is now your branch manager. Think about the person that started as order entry and now has one of your top escrow desks in your operation. Think about how we can recruit for the front desk, recruit for order entry, recruit for all of these roles, and really think about how they learn the ropes. That's exactly what I was talking about in the recruiting trifecta on number 2 of coaching and mentoring and helping them to step up. So I would venture to say we need to stop hiring and start recruiting for every role we have within the organization. So again, just dialogue. So let's talk about how we recruit. This is kind of my preview for you. I'll be presenting at the ALTA seminars, the big conference in October in Florida. I hope to see you there. And I will be talking about recruiting there as well, but we're going to get really, really in-depth. But today is a bit of an overview and a preview of what I consider the milestones that we use when we recruit for this industry, as well as what we teach our clients on how to recruit. So there's two different ways that we recruit. We recruit revenue attached and we recruit non-revenue attached. Let's talk about revenue attached first, because this is most of what we do. The first thing we need to do is we need to determine the needs for a good cultural fit. What is your operation like? Is it casual? Is it super professional? Do people need to be self-starters? And we need to assess the current team. Now I want to pause for 1 minute here, because those two steps are the most often skipped steps of all of our clients that we run into. People jump right into creating a target list, talking to folks, taking them to lunch. What we need to do is look at what we're trying to build and what blind spots we have on that current team. Before we work with any of our clients, we do an assessment. We go in, we interview the team, we find out what's going on, and then we make recommendations on how we can help with training and coaching and things like that. Any kind of work we do with clients, we assess first. So what I would encourage you to do is just sit down and look at the team. What has shifted for the team over the last 10 years? How has it become a different culture? How has, the environment changed? All of these things. And then look at the skill set of the team. If you've got a bunch of folks that are great on files, but you need somebody who's more sales and customer service oriented and wants to be more of a out there, visiting networking events, whatever, and you're looking for an escrow officer, that's the body you need to be recruiting. So be thinking about those things. The next step is commit to a target list. And one of the things that I think that's interesting about this is we don't tend to take this step very seriously. I think a lot of us, and myself included when I was first starting recruiting as well, is we have a few folks in mind, and we think that's a sufficient target list. What I would say is let's think about a target list before we have a head count. Before we even get to the point of needing a warm body, let's create a people who we would most like to have on our team. Just like you do when you're doing sales. You have a most wanted list of the realtors and lenders that you want in your area. Let's commit to a target list of the most wanted people that we have. Jeremy just asked me a question about assessing some staff. I think that's a great opportunity. Let's go ahead and see how many of you assess your staff. Let's do another poll real quick. So while we're doing that, I'll talk a little bit more about this target list. I think that's a great opportunity. So when you commit to a target list, it's systematic, it's consistent, and it's persistent contact. Talk to these folks that you're recruiting, even if you don't have a head count. Let them know that you like them. Let them know that you're interested. Settle in. It could be a long ride. I mean, you guys have all got stories about folks that you've recruited for 3, 4, 5 years, and then they finally came over. But I think if we have that most wanted list, it makes it a lot easier when we do have a head count come time to hire. The next piece is after you've got that target list, I think it's important to meet no matter what. Even if the answer is no, they're happy where they currently are, they're not looking for a job, meet them anyways. When you meet in person, something changes. The energy changes. You get an opportunity to have a different dialogue with them. Meet, and then what I would say is just ask questions. Get them talking, very much like when you do sales and you ask a prospect a bunch of questions, get them talking about themselves, same thing. When you get to the point of actually interviewing a revenue-attached employee, behavioral interviewing is best, and this is a lot of what I'll be talking about in October in Florida. But behavioral interviewing is based on human behavior research, and it's a way to word questions. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's the best way to do it. The old days of interviewing based on personality don't work. We have many more tools in our toolbox that we can draw on. We've got personality tests, we've got maps, we've got all kinds of things that we can utilize, but behavioral interviewing is, number one, free. Anybody can learn to do it, and number two, it's a great predictor of future behavior. The next piece that you need to do when you're recruiting revenue-attached employees is sell them their story. Get them talking about their ideal workspace, their ideal work environment, their ideal team. Don't sell them on what you're offering. Sell them on what they want. And then finally, negotiating through their first day or their arrival. And it's really funny, guys, and maybe put a star next to this one if you're taking notes. A lot of folks think that once the deal is signed, they're coming over and all is good. I actually go one step further when we're recruiting. We actually coach anybody that we recruit through their first 90 days on the job. And the reason we do that is because they're going to determine in their first 90 days if they're staying or going. So what I would recommend is think about how you're going to nurture them through their arrival, through their first day, and then how you keep them happy in that honeymoon period. So let's talk about the poll. Jeremy, what did we find out?
Well,
an assessment of our team.
yeah, well, good news. Almost 80% do some assessing of their staff to see what needs they have.
Fantastic. This is a huge shift from about 5 years ago, guys, so I love to hear this. What I would recommend is make sure it's an in-depth assessment in terms of skills and not just personality. One of the things that we see is they assess the team and go, okay, I need a sales rep in this territory. I need a sales rep that focuses on lenders. Go deeper. Truly look at the team in terms of the skill set and start there. That's awesome, guys. This is really good news. Let's talk next about revenue unattached employees, so what we would consider outside candidates. Same thing. You start with the assessment, and again, the assessment is really crucial. Dig deep and figure out where the needs are on your team and where the blind spots are. Then I would talk about determining the traits, behaviors, and other experiences that are going to predict their success in our industry. So for instance, if you're hiring somebody to be an escrow officer, we could all agree that they need to be incredibly detail-oriented. They need to be able to multitask like a champ, and they need to have a great sense of urgency and a wonderful phone demeanor, correct? So we can look at other industries that have similar traits and decide what the parallels will be and see if they will be able to translate over into our industry. The next step is obviously recruiting through resumes and looking at those and evaluating each candidate fairly. One of the things that we do that I would highly recommend is create the criteria. Create the job expectation, and from the job expectation, write the job posting. And then when you get the resumes, look at that job expectation and weight all the different pieces. So if you have, let's say you're hiring a sales manager, and they need to be good at consultative sales, coaching, training, overcoming objections. They need to be good at leading, obviously. So look at those things and create some kind of systematic way to review each candidate so that you can compare apples to apples. The next step in it is always a phone interview. I always encourage folks to do a phone interview first. Why not meet in person? Because this person is going to be talking to your clients over the phone. So you want to make sure that they can actually handle themselves in a telephone call. So interview on the phone first, then follow-up meetings with the candidates that rise to the top. And then include other folks in the process at that point. And what I mean by that is that's when your escrow officers get to interview them. That's when your sales reps get to interview your title officers, your branch managers, whoever it is in your office that is an influencer on this decision. Because remember, they're going to be working with this person day in and day out. Finally, again, behavioral interviewing is best, and then, of course, negotiating and nurturing through that arrival. And I think the key to remember is we need to vet everyone. Inside, outside, doesn't matter. We need to vet them, and we need to let our staff be a part of the process. That being said, I actually think the staff can be part of the process early on. Get your team involved in recruiting even when you don't have a head count. Get them talking about who they want on their team. And that's where sort of that most wanted list can come into play. Another thing that we've run into is recent issues in our industry. There have been a lot of lawsuits about recruiting and things of that nature. And I guess the rule of thumb on the lawsuits is play nice in the recruiting world and you're going to stay out of court. But most of these suits came out of people recruiting whole offices or people recruiting when there was a signed agreement or something like that. Just be careful, know the laws where you are, and our recommendation to stay out of this trouble is to recruit based on a process that you've vetted. You create the guidelines in your operation and your HR department knows about it, and make sure that you're in alignment with all of the laws. I mean, that sounds really simple, but a lot of folks don't have a recruiting process. Let me give you an example of a recruiting process. If we're recruiting for a client, the first thing we do is we create the job expectation. Then we create the job description and posting. We review resumes. We do phone interviews. We do a second phone interview with a separate colleague who knows nothing about the candidate other than their resume. Then we send them for a personality profile test. Then we do a role play interview with them where they actually train and coach over the phone and or in person. And then we will present our client with final candidates. So they actually have quite a few hoops they jump through before they even get to our clients. What I would recommend is look at your team and see who they need to be interviewing with and create a checks and balance system within your own organization. 9 times out of 10, if you've got a good process in place, you'll be okay. So I mentioned behavioral interviewing, and let's talk a little bit about that, and I want to stay on time, but behavioral interviewing is the best indicator for future performance because it's based on past performance. You're asking for actual evidence that they've encountered rather than sort of a hypothetical question, which is a lot of interviewing, and frankly, we probably all got hired based on hypotheticals. But what they might do is interesting. What they have done really tells you what their success rate is going to be. So, for example, the way that you can look at it is identify the experience or trait that you want them to have for the job. So let's say that you want this person to be very resourceful. You run an operation where they've got to be a self-starter and they've got to find answers on their own. So I might ask the question of the candidate, in what way do you consider yourself resourceful? That's a fairly general question, right? I'm going to ask them that. They're going to tell me a little bit, and then I'm going to say, okay, give me 2 examples, at least one of which is work-related, where you demonstrated your resourcefulness. And then I need to pause for thought because I want them to think about it and be able to share an actual story with me. If they're reaching and can't answer that question, my guess is they're probably not very resourceful in that moment, or maybe they're not interviewing well. But we really want them to be able to tell their story. And again, I'll be talking a little bit more about this at the ALTA conference this fall, but there are a lot of resources online and in bookstores for you to learn about behavioral interviewing. It really has come in vogue in the last 10 years, and it's a great predictor of future behavior and, more importantly, future success. So I would really encourage you to use it. To kind of wrap up today, and I want to leave some time for questions, invest now in developmental training for your existing up-and-comers. That is one of the easiest and cheapest recruiting strategies that you can use. It's recruiting from within, and it helps you to retain your top talent. Think about how hard it was to get those folks to come over in the first place. You want to keep them there. You have a lot invested in them. They've been a great employee. But let's look at who we've got internally. Recruit from our internal pool, but we've got to train and coach to get them to the next level. And then secondly, evaluate how you can inject fresh energy by hiring outside of the industry. Quick story on this. When we do recruiting, especially in sales, the first thing we get from our clients is they have to come from a title industry. And my question is, tell me why you think that. And they want them to know the industry. Guys, I get that. I get that they need to know the industry. But what's more important, that they know how to read a HUD or that they have the fire in the belly to go get new clients? You can teach them how to read a HUD. You can't teach the fire in the belly. So look at how you can inject some of that fresh energy. And then targeting top performers is a lot like a courtship. You've got to invest in the relationship if you ever hope to recruit them with anything other than money. And let's also remember, not everyone is money motivated. So even though a lot of what we've done in our industry is recruiting and giving higher salaries and signing bonuses and things like that, and oh, by the way, signing bonuses are back. I've been seeing them. We really don't want them to just come because we were the highest bidder. We want them to come over because they want to be a part of this team, and they want to work here, and they want to be a part of our world. So I'm going to end there and open it to questions. And again, this is just a very brief overview, but hopefully you were able to get some steps for recruiting, both revenue attached and outside candidates, to help you start thinking about ways to recruit differently within the industry and hire some top talent. Jeremy, do we have any questions today?
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. We had a few come in during your presentation. We'll try and knock some out here and let everyone get on their way. Peter had a couple kind of along the same lines, and I'll kind of ask them both at the same time. One is, how do you create a how do you create a culture that's appealing to the younger generation? And then also, maybe what are some of the projected skill sets that would be required for the next generation of employees?
Great question. Let's start with the first one. How do you create a culture that appeals to the next generation? It's different depending on where you are, but think about what the younger generation wants. They want some flexibility in time. They may want to work from home. And a lot of the research is showing us actually that folks are very productive from home. So, you know, we can look, there was just a Stanford study last month that came out that was saying that I think it was 13% higher productivity when folks work from home. That's a possibility. But I think you look at what this next generation is looking for. They're very tech savvy. They want life balance. The days of workaholism and 14-hour days is not really appealing to them. And you know, I'm sort of old school, so I'm chained to the desk sort of thing. But I think we start looking at creative ways that we can help them create that life balance. But I think more importantly, keep up with the hiring chatter out there. There's stuff on Yahoo News almost every week about recruiting millennials. So I would encourage you to kind of reach out, read some of those things. But the main thing is tech savvy and life balance are the ones that continue to rise to the top. Jeremy, what was the second question on that one?
It was any job skills, future projected job skills that may be required for the next generation that would align with the evolution of the title industry.
In my opinion, I think it's different on how your operation runs, but I think the one that we can all see right now is the social media aspect. I mean, 10 years ago, none of us could have predicted that. So I think it's the social media piece. And I also think it's going to be the creativity around closed offices and the fact that agents are not in the office anymore. The days of holding an office meeting and 45 agents are there and they're good producers are falling by the wayside in a lot of parts of the country. So I think you're going to have someone that is more resourceful and really creates the opportunity to get in front of these folks. So I think you're looking at some of the millennials as creative, resourceful, and tech-savvy in terms of social media and marketing.
And we actually have a lot of questions floating in here. We'll try and get a few.
Bring it on.
Yeah, we'll try and knock a few out. If we don't get any, Cynthia, we'll get you Cynthia's email. I don't know, why don't you share with that right now, and people can email you.
Yeah, perfect.
Want to follow up.
I'll go ahead and send this on the chat line right now. Are you going to put it on there?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? You probably have it memorized better than I do.
I do.
In the meantime, while you're typing that, if you can multitask here.
I can.
All right. Britt wanted to know if you've seen other industries that might be a good talent match for, you know, our industry. You know, other industries where those strengths may align with someone who might be a good person in escrow.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. It's one that we get a lot. It depends on the role. If you're talking about escrow, you're looking for somebody who's been detail-oriented, who can handle a lot of multitasking, who's great with paperwork, even though we're paperless, and all of those things. So you look at other industries where they've had competing priorities, other insurances, property and casualty, things of that nature, the legal world, paralegal assistants, things of that nature. You can also look to accounting and bookkeeping where they've really had to be detail-oriented, spreadsheets, numbers, things like that. And let's not forget the folks that are coming back into the workforce, the moms and dads that have taken time off to raise kids. Running a household is considered a multitasking thing. So you can look at some of the volunteer organizations that they've been a part of, perhaps, and things of that nature. So I would really look at, to answer this person's question, I would really look at the criteria for the job and then create a list of talents and then start looking. But I really tend to dig in the pools of legal, accounting, other insurances, anything that had kind of a customer service bend.
Thanks.
For sales, it could be anything, by the way. For sales, any kind of sales, what I would venture to say for them, especially in our industry, is that they've sold an intangible, because you know, you can't go get a box of title insurance kind of thing. So if they've sold a product, that's one thing, and they've probably sold on features and benefits of the product. With an intangible, they need to sell a little bit of vaporware and need to have that talent and skill set to uncover needs of a client. So if you're looking for someone in sales, I'd look that they've sold intangibles prior to this.
All right. Molly had a question on the behavioral assessments. She wanted to know if you had any suggestions for any sites where they may be able to do this free of charge, or Another person also asked, does your company offer personality tests?
We do. We actually have a personality expert on staff that does all those testings. We do it as part of our assessment when we're working within a client, and we do it as part of our assessment when we're hiring as well. So we have that. The other thing is for behavioral interviewing, to answer that question, behavioral interviewing is something that you can learn to do. And honest to goodness, guys, Google behavioral interviewing. You will be shocked at the lists and lists of questions that come up. And it's just the way the question itself is worded so that you're asking for specific examples and historical data rather than a hypothetical situation. So that's really the only difference. It's a skill to learn. And of course, you can certainly outsource it to someone. I mean, we always use behavioral interviewing when we're recruiting, and a lot of other recruiting companies are doing this now as well. But it's something that you could do on your own, quite frankly, and not have to pay somebody.
All right, great. And Daryl has a question, and it's probably a question that's on the minds of a lot of people who are concerned with baby boomers retiring and taking the industry knowledge and best practices with them. What advice do you have for people on the line here to maintain best practices?
Great question. So, Daryl, you get the gold star for the day because that's part of that recruiting trifecta that I talked about, where we're recruiting from within and mentoring up. We have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring, and that knowledge is going with them. And aside from the fact that maybe these boomers want to come back on a consultant basis, that knowledge is going to go right with them to the golf course and to the beach. So we need to find a way to create succession planning within our organizations today to start the dialogue and share that information. We're actually hosting a title agency forum in September here, and one of the questions on our assessment that we sent to the participants was about succession planning and how you're sharing the knowledge from your senior staff. Unfortunately, in our industry, because our senior staff is often our busiest staff members, they don't have an opportunity to mentor because of time management. They just don't simply have the time. What I would encourage you to do, Daryl, on your staff is look at the folks that you need to be sharing that knowledge with and do a lunch and learn once a month. Have them teach the rest of the team or give them someone to mentor. Make it part of their job. Of course, ask them if they're interested in that first. But I think that there's a way that we can continue to impart the knowledge of our senior staff before they're truly in the twilight of their careers.
All right, Cynthia, great way to kind of, I think, wrap up today's discussion. Again, I don't think we got to everyone's question. If we didn't, feel free to email Cynthia. Her email there is in the chat box. It's cmcgovern@orangeleafconsulting.com, and she will be more than happy to answer your questions. Looking ahead, we will be holding our next Title Topics webinar on Thursday, September 12th, and this will be an hour-long webinar from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, as K&L Gates partner Phil Schulman will be providing a RESPA primer and review recent enforcement actions and penalties levied by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I'm sure he will be offering some of his usual jokes. So that should be a pretty good presentation, as he's going to be addressing some of the key elements the CFPB is focused on when examining settlement services providers for RESPA compliance. So be on the lookout for registration information for this webinar. Cynthia, any parting comments, anything else you'd like to add before we conclude today's call?
I just want to thank you again for letting us be a part of this, and I want to remind everybody, this is the beginning stages of a conversation, and I would love to talk to any of you that have any questions. So please email me directly. You're welcome to call our office, visit our website, orangeleafconsulting.com. Let us know how we can support you. I mean, we're dedicated to helping this industry to not only stay viable, but to thrive within the next 50 years again. So let's talk about how we can continue to recruit top talent from the millennial generation and continue to evolve. And thank you again for letting us be a part of this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Cynthia. As you said, beginning the conversation and looking how we can sustain the industry, definitely very important. So anyway, that will bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Cynthia, thanks again for joining us, and I hope all the listeners found the presentation